Jaylen Brown. Brendon, Jaylen Brown's getting paid quite a bit of money. This is not a surprise. It finally got done. He came back from a trip in Europe, I believe, and
Spain.
man in Spain, and that man is now going to be getting paid a supermax of $304 million. It is currently the richest contract in the league. It won't be for long. We're going to keep seeing more and more and more of these massive supermaxes for certain cases. Jason Tatum, his teammate in particular, is going to be making so much money. Mm-hmm. Brendon, look, this is what I want to say, kind of speak out of the two sides of my mouth on this a little bit. I think it's kind of you have to on a deal like this. On one hand, they had to do this. This is what you pay your really good players to keep them. This is what you pay guys who, despite some flaws, is a very good player, is impactful. I think by some of the uber nerdy community is underrated in certain ways. I think this is a thing you do. On the other hand, it's going to be hard for any player at Jaylen Brown's level. I think even up or above this. I think it's going to be really hard for any one of these players to always live up to the money on some of these deals. Some of these the money on these deals is crazy, right? Some of the money on these deals is just so high that it's the same
percentage as it's been. Why is it any different for him to live up to a 35% max than it was for somebody 5 years ago who signed a super max to live up to theirs?
It's just because it's
total.
It's just because it's more. It's $304 million. That's why. That's why. I think that, like, when you and like, so there's a Ringer piece about this where it's like Wiggins is going to make 54.5 in 2024, 2025, and 25-26.
Do you mean Jaylen Brown?
No, I'm saying this is a point of comparison making. Wiggins is going to make.
Well, Andrew Wiggins hasn't signed a contract like that yet, so I don't know what you mean.
No, he has a contract. Does he not have a?
No.
Does he not have a contract for 24, 25, and 25, 26? If not, this piece is incorrect.
Are you saying $56 million combined?
Yeah, I'm saying 54.5
okay.
over those. Yeah, he's making 54.5 over 24, 25, and 25, 26. Brown is going to make $109 million over those 2 years. The numbers for some of these really big deals are just going to be so high that I think you're just going to see. Like, I just think it's going to get harder to live up to some of these deals because the numbers are so high. It's not about the cap percentage to some degree. That's how it's going to be spun. I just think the numbers are so high that it gets harder and harder to kind of like fully maximize some of what they are to some degree. That's just where I think we're at.
Yeah, I guess 5 years ago, if you had two players on 35% supermaxes on the same team, like let's say when James Harden and Russell Westbrook ended up on the Rockets together, you know, they had cheap Clint Capella, cheapish Eric Gordon, you know, some young guys, not a lot of depth. Robert Covington gets traded there, and you're kind of just scrounging around. Like, that became cost prohibitive for them. This will become cost prohibitive for the Celtics. I don't really think it's any worse now. I think the problem that I think is really truly, as much as I agree that you draw the line in the sand here of you either give Jaylen Brown the contract that he's owed and eligible to get based on his own accomplishments, which is the important part here. He got all NBA second team. Like, this is not just some random thing that happens because of how long he's been in the league or this and that. He earned it because he had an amazing season. He was really, really, really good last year. So unless you're going to you're either going to give him that contract or you're going to trade him, is my point. So I get why you do it. But as much as that's true, like, I went back and looked, and I brought this up in the last podcast, but I wanted to remember the details. Blake Griffin. He signed a supermax at age 28. So 1.5 years older than Jaylen is right now, in July 2017. And, of course, we all remember, got traded 6 months later for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. So I understand the value stuff is a little different now than it was then. But is Jaylen going to have more or less trade value when he's 27, upcoming midway through this year, the first year after he signed his extension, than Blake Griffin was then? Like, do you think the Celtics could do better if next summer they underperform or he gets upset or the money gets to be a problem and they have to pivot and trade Jaylen Brown on this contract? Can they get better than two, youngish role players and a first-round pick? That's what the Clippers got for Blake Griffin. Is it going to be better or worse than that?
I think maybe better just because he's not the injury concern. That's the differentiator there to me, because Blake already had real injury concerns when he got that contract.
And you would say the same thing about John Wall, right? I mean, that's what happened with him. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to me as these continue, because like one of the guys I think we both have on our should be traded list that we can get to in a second is already on one of these supermaxes. The Suns pivot chip, if it ever were to come to it, is Devin Booker, who's on a supermax, and trading him to reset things if it ever got that bad. Like, what the value is of these players who are at the very least like reasonably paid, but by the end of the contract probably overpaid. Maybe Bradley Beal is the example. I know he had the no trade clause, but like, what would Bradley Beal have even gotten if he didn't have a no trade clause? How much would the Wizards have gotten back for him?
I mean, maybe at least one first, and then, or a better player than they got, right? Like you would think, just because he wasn't dictating things as much. But it is a lot of money, and Brendon, here's the other part of it that I think is kind of part of this that isn't like a team building thing or like a cap thing. I think that part of the numbers we're going to see now are going to be figures owners are going to be more hesitant to pay at times. I just think we're going to be in that space with some of these. Like, you're going to have some owners that are just not going to want to do some of this or pay some of this. That's okay. Like, I like, if there's certain guys you don't want to pay it for, I don't think that's like an unreasonable thing where you want to absorb some of these, right? And I wonder too if we start seeing a middle ground. I wonder too if like this hasn't how it's been worked lately. The contracts have been, you give the guy with the if he's really good, the maximum of what he's owed, and you celebrate the win of it. But let's use Darius Garland as an example here. Let's say when he's just about to kick in his he's just starting his 5-year rookie max, the fun max, right? As Wendy calls it. When he gets to his next deal, heading into his late 20s, into his 30s on that deal. Let's say he's really good, but he makes some All-NBA teams. He's Supermax eligible. Like, I could see a world where like you have to thread the line of, hey, this guy's really good. We don't know if he's Supermax good. Can you thread the needle between the normal max and the Supermax and still find happy parties where some of these numbers get a little bit lower, especially when you have to consider the second apron? Like, we are in the second apron world now as well. Like, this is just complicating a lot of this, I think, for some of these teams. I think these deals are here's how I put it. I think the Supermax deals that we're going to see given out are complicating an already complicated salary cap environment for teams to navigate.
Yeah, I think the only real difference, even hearing you go through all that, is the second apron. Because a lot of what you're describing has always been the case. I mean, Blake Griffin, to continue with that analogy, like, he got cut. He got bought out on the last year of his Supermax contract. And Russell Westbrook just had the same thing happen. James Harden luckily was able to keep it going a little longer than those guys. But the history of it's not great. John Wall, obviously, like the biggest cautionary tale of all, mostly because of the fluke injuries and everything. But like the risk of giving people so much of the cap has always been there, and these deals have not gone well, period. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when the worst of all of this was going on, like pre-COVID, that, like, I remember Haley O'Shaughnessy at The Ringer wrote a really long piece about, like, did the NBA, like, disastrously screw this whole Supermax thing up? These players are still getting traded. They're not even staying on their teams, which is supposed to be the point, right? If they're great and loyal, they get rewarded for it, and their team is able to offer them more than other teams are. But then they get traded anyway, and then these guys were getting hurt, and the value is bad and everything else. I think we're a little bit away from that now, but the risk has always been there. I think that the Boston thing that they have to worry about, and the new part of all of this, is the second apron. But I think that teams, to me, honestly, like, I feel like the risk of the second apron is going to be palatable before long. I think that teams are going to just understand that it's just another one of the costs of pursuing a championship. Unless you get lucky and you have a player great enough to win with a weaker supporting cast, or you just are good enough early enough in the players' careers, kind of like the Warriors were, you're just going to have to pay this. And you're going to have to deal with the second apron, and you're going to have to pay the significant luxury tax like you have seen teams always do. Like I don't actually know if the second apron is going to be something that dramatically changes the top of the league, even if the league wants it to.
Yeah, I will admit I might just have sticker shock on some of these numbers, Brendon. I really just might, because these numbers are huge. Like they're not killing.
The Suns got sold. Forget the Suns. The Charlotte Hornets just got sold for $3 billion.
I know. I'm just saying.
I mean, what we're talking about is just like a NWO here, you know.
The numbers are just getting crazy. I think it's just I think I am just not used to how big these numbers have gotten.
Well, as you said to start it off, it's the first of many, so get used to it, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I should be used to some of it, considering like I'm a soccer fan who just like was reading how much Kylian Mbappe was getting offered by like Saudi Arabia, and it's like the price for these athletes is getting really, really high, and I'm glad for them, because like Jaylen Brown making $300 million is great for Jaylen Brown, like independent of everything else we have said or talked about. Like that's a win for Jaylen Brown. He's even if that's whatever the tax rate is in that guy is still making like more money than I'm going to see in my lifetime, you know?
He already did when he was a rookie, but
like this is like you can like this is like another tier of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know. Of course, I'm for the most part, if they're part of an industry that's generating this much money, then they should see their cut of it. That hasn't changed.